This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today we got a frequent flyer on the podcast and one of my favorite guests to speak with when we talk law enforcement across Canada. For that, I've got the president and CEO of the National Police Federation, Brian Sauve, back on the show. So welcome to you, sir.
Thanks, Nathan. You're patting my back there. I don't know if I should be your favorite. Sometimes no one ever calls me their favorite, but thanks for that.
Hey, I'm glad to give you the vote of confidence. You know what? We learn so much when we have you and other members of the NPF on, and I think I've said this before. You guys are very out there at the forefront of a lot of this. And a lot of what you do trickles down to the municipal side as well. You know, everybody across the nation is watching what's happening with the RCMP. So when a decision comes out there, people wonder how that's going to impact us down here. So I mean, you're kind of the tip of the spear on that. So I'm very appreciative of the work you do.
Well, I mean, one of the things, for example, just this past week, Thursday now. So, for example, last week, we got a reach in from Senior Deputy Larkin of the RCMP on behalf of the Commissioner, basically talking about how Bill C-22 lawful access is having challenges at the House Committee, right? So we sat back and, relationships, I think, matter in my perspective all across the realm. So, that actual introductory meeting with Thomas Creek, Commissioner of the OPP, Thomas Damatakis, President of the CPA, with us, with Senior Deputy Larkin, led to, and I don't know if you followed along, but a joint media release that went out yesterday morning between all three organizations.
Oh, okay, yeah.
About the quick end passage of C-22 because lawful access is needed by our membership, regardless of agency across Canada. And, explaining a little bit about what it's not and what it does. And similarly, right, I think we wrote letters to basically every MP in both French and English about explaining our joint position, right? So that's like all your chiefs, your management, and then all your labor, your CPA and your MPF coming together on one particular issue to push something forward just for the betterment of public safety broadly in Canada. And that's, I think, a different world than where we were 6-7 years ago. You haven't seen that broad joint public advocacy happening. And I think it's a good thing. I hope it continues.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring that up, and we're going to get more into that later, like the aspects of working with government. And I'm curious, we'll have to come back to that as well about just how short a time frame some of this turnaround has occurred in. Because I think people always see the broader messaging, like we're united across Canada and everybody's working together and it's all sunshine and roses. It's not the truth all the time. So, but you guys are definitely, you're making an impact, and it has changed greatly. But one thing I wanted to kind of start on with you is just talking about your time is kind of coming to a close with the NPF. You got a week, 2 weeks left as president?
What are we, Thursday? Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks left. My term is coming to an end. And I'll be going back to the RCMP, who knows in what capacity, come the end of June, and move on from there.
So that hasn't been determined yet, like where you're going to land or posting or anything like that?
Well, no, it hasn't. And as you can probably imagine, and what our members will appreciate this, staffing actions don't necessarily happen overnight.
Yeah.
So it takes a while to figure something out. And I'm still in that particular process, which is fine. I'm not worried. We have vacancies all across the country.
Yeah. Well, maybe you need to get one overseas. Turn it into a bit of a vacation or something, if possible. One thing I wanted to ask was, just in your entire tenure as the president, what are some of the notable accomplishments, maybe things that really stick out for you maybe they were a little more near and dear for you, or like you had a personal vested interest in. But what really stands out throughout the entire time you're in there? I know there's a lot, and- but I mean, had a lot of projects in there and benefited a lot of members. But anything particular to you?
Well, if you, so I mean, I'm going back to 2020. So, for example, I think one of the big things, and we probably forget about it as time goes on, right? Think about Porta Peak and the Mass Casualty Commission. So, April 18th, 19th had a massive tragedy throughout Porta Peak and Bible Hill area going into Nova Scotia. You're in the midst of a pandemic. So we are 3.5 months into actually being an organization, limited resources, limited staff, and then ultimately the protests. And then later on that year, obviously, you had George Floyd and the murder in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You had Black Lives Matter. You had those challenges. And then the public protests of the Porta Peak incident led to a joint federal and provincial inquiry. Um, in my service, right, I lived through the YVR Robert Jasinski tasering with 4 members.
Yeah.
That particular incident, I think, guided my perspective on this mass casualty one. And what we did was we said, we're not going to have a YVR 2.0. So hence we had a firm that was retained by us, and they sought full intervention status in that inquiry. It was the first time, I think, a police union in Canada actually had full intervener status at some kind of a public inquiry. And then, so fast forward to the end of that, and what you saw from my perspective, and I think what you see today, is the members involved did not become the scapegoats of the incident. The public safety continuum, whether it be RCMP, whether it be deployment of resources, whether it be the province, whether it be the feds, became the recipients of actionable items out of all those recommendations. And to me, I chalk that up as a massive win, right? Because if we had not been there, then I suspect most of that testimony would not have been in a trauma-informed approach. Most of those sessions with the Mass Casualty Commission would have been a name and blame session about the members who responded, how they were understaffed, how they didn't get there fast enough, how they didn't do this, how they didn't do that, how they didn't do this. And I think what a lot of people don't know is that all the interested parties in that particular Mass Casualty Commission were also suing the government,
Oh wow.
and were having their counsel paid for by the government to intervene at the mass casualty. So it's like, okay, so here's the government paying for lawyers to go on a fact-finding mission at a mass casualty commission event to end up with evidence that they could then use in a lawsuit against the government down the road. So I think it became an important watershed moment, if you will, for the NPF to show that we can intervene on a grand scale. And very similarly, not long after that, obviously, you had the Public Order Emergency Commission in Ottawa about the Emergencies Act and how the Prime Minister invoked that. And again, we sought intervention and got to cross-examine and lead evidence and such there. So I think it set a bit of a trend. Maybe it set some expectations from our membership, which I think is great. And broadly, the membership of any police agency across the country, right? I think the expectation of your union should be to defend the actions of the members if the responsibility falls to the organization or the governing body.
So is it a lot to do with kind of the control of some of the narratives that go out there, and whether is it this member's actions alone or this group, or does it go to the greater organization and the system that's in place? Like who's really at fault, and you don't want individuals to bear the brunt of that and be the scapegoat for well, especially for like mass casualty events or big things like to put that on an individual or even a small group of individuals, that's no, that would be crushing, like soul crushing for those people. So
Oh, for sure. And we had, I mean, just within that one instance, there's so many different sub files, right? There's the serious incident response team that investigated the shooting at the gas station, right? That ended the threat. But then you also had the CERT investigation into the fire hall incident for what could be considered friendly fire, if you will. But then ultimately there was 2 years later, they wanted to refer that CERT investigation to the SIU in Ontario for a second opinion because no charges were recommended. So, like, we had to intervene in that to basically say, hey, no, just because one crown said no doesn't mean you can go to another jurisdiction, another agency, and try again.
Yeah, the shopping.
Yeah, answer shopping, right? And a lot of that was, yeah, I'm not a popular person in certain circles in Nova Scotia. Like, honestly, throughout some of that mass casualty commission, I would be walking through the airport or walking downtown Halifax wondering if someone's going to come out and club me because you were an advocate for an organization just by our members wearing the uniform, for them not having done something wrong when everyone was looking for a victim because the bad guy's dead and he's never going to trial.
We're looking for someone to blame, right? So the bad guy's not there anymore. So who do we go after?
Yeah.
What do when you think about all those things though, what are you looking at passing on to the next president? So the incoming president is Rob Fair.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's got big shoes to fill, and there's obviously with law enforcement at any point in time, there's always a million things on the go. So when you look at all these things you've done and all the people you have to involve, missions and changing laws and working with government, what's some advice that you kind of impart some of your wisdom on Rob as he's coming in?
Well, I've always taken the perspective. We can attack institutions versus attacking people, right? So, okay, so if the IIO or here in Alberta, ACERT or the Attorney General or the government, makes a poor decision that impacts our members' lives, right? Well, let's attack the institution and figure out how we can attack that institution. But at the same time, and this is the balancing act, how do you attack that institution while maintaining a working relationship?
Yeah.
So it's kind of that old adage, it's just business, Fred. And okay, I'll see you on the golf course Monday.
Oh.
Right. And understanding that politicians are politicians and they make decisions in their daily lives and they might make statements that are endorsed by their party that are inaccurate, reprehensible sometimes. So we can attack them on that based on the office that they hold. But we still have to have a relationship with Mike Ellis, for example, here in Alberta, or the premier, to be able to accomplish common goals. So there's that balancing act. And second to that is, maybe even first to that, tied for first place, is I think one of the goals of any union, whether it's Unifor or whether it's the CSN in Quebec, should be to improve the perception of Canadians of what their members do on a day-to-day basis.
So just like an education piece, really?
A little bit, right? And you see it, we've seen it over the last year in British Columbia, where the BC Teachers Federation has been spending millions of dollars as they're going through budget cuts and challenges with the current BC government and negotiation stalemates and contract negotiations. They, millions of dollars spent to advertise how teachers are an integral part of education and the growth of kids. Cool. We could do that too. We don't have the ability to strike, and we have interest-based arbitration, and we'll negotiate with Treasury Board. But at the same time, I think we need Canadians to have a deeper understanding of what the RCMP does across Canada and to build the brand of the member wearing the uniform versus the organization as it is. So, and we've seen a little bit, like, I go back to June or May 2020 when George Floyd was killed in the States. We started on our first national public opinion survey of law enforcement in the RCMP in Canada. It was actually, the support was fairly high. And then we went into September, we did another one, and actually support was higher. So,
Yeah.
and that has a trickle down effect, right? We're probably one of the largest police organization in Canada, the largest police union in Canada. So how do we have an impact on and the byproducts of these things about showing the RCMP as they are and the membership as they are? Obviously, a byproduct is going to be you're going to have 19, 20-year-old kids who are going to think about a career in law enforcement. Okay. And you will see definitely an uptick in those who might be interested and clicking apply here. I think that's great. It's not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to avoid members being um, looked at in a negative light by those in Canada. It's in a positive light. It's choosing a life of service. You sign a contract, you did too when you joined DPS, when you joined the RCMP. You sign up that particular day, and it's like, I'm agreeing to give my life for my community. Like, full stop. I think people forget that.
But people are giving themselves to something far bigger or greater than, what others might kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yep.
Yeah, it's putting that out there and expressing that. Like, how do you get that message across to everybody? Show them, like, they're signing up for some real danger
Yep.
job. So,
Exactly. And so, yeah, there's a couple things, it's like, advertising and communicating that the membership are there and they're doing a fantastic job, and support for Canadians in policing. Like, we're up in the top 10 as far as the trustworthy side of the house, with doctors and emergency room nurses and such. Like, judges and lawyers are way down at the bottom. Politicians also, but police officers are actually up. So we need to continue to build that trust factor, so that ultimately, when we call on, I don't know, the civilian director of ACERT making a stupid decision, that we actually have that credibility and the support of the public behind us going on a media campaign to do this, that, and the other thing.
well, so what else or do you think is kind of like the highlights from your time? It sounds like you're really focused on the image of the members, but also controlling some of those narratives. And I mean, that was a thing I even brought up here when I first started this podcast. I brought this up with our association when I was in there at the time.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of like, I don't, the police service is going to be the police service. They're going to protect themselves to some degree, uh, unless they're maybe really certain of an answer on something. But, I felt like all these, from chief of police to the president of the association, they'd go out and they'd do these interviews with media. They could give a half-hour interview, and the media would take 2 lines out of a full 30-minute interview, and then it would get spun a certain way. And, that's one of the reasons why I got into doing the podcast. It's like,
Yeah.
we need to put some actual stories out there, some unvarnished truth, and, let the public know exactly what's going on. So,
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from sorry, I mean, our strategy there obviously is, I think Canadians recognize that we live very close to the 49th parallel, and a lot of the media and the news stories that come up and get populated in our social media feeds are US based. Let's build a narrative that policing in Canada is not policing in the United States, which I think we've done quite effectively in building, whether it's our Twitter or X or our LinkedIn or our Instagram or even our Facebook social media followings.
our own identity through all that.
100%, right? And then you build that, and then I know the CPA did a little bit of this through 2019 through 2021. We obviously have a little more resources and staff to be able to do it dedicated. But our social media platforms, like if you just look at Facebook alone, for example, we're almost 300,000 followers. We're able to, through our staff, to be able to ensure that most of them are actual real people versus bots and stuff like that. And something that we put out like annually, I think just through that one social media channel, we hit about 80 million Canadians a year. Or 80 million people a year, right? So monthly, like anything that you put forward, and then there's the reach of the shares, right, which grows exponentially. So if I wanted to call out someone. You can also geo-target, like specifically in different social media platforms. Like if we want to target the Lower Mainland, or we want to target politicians in Ottawa or the GTA, right? You can put something out to those supporters or those followers who are just in that area and change minds. Really, it's about creating your own particular media channel, because we're not going to win. We're not going to win a fight with the CBC.
Yeah.
In open media, because just like you said, they'll do the interview for 45 minutes and use 30 seconds.
What are some of the biggest outstanding items, maybe things that you worked on over a period of time, but as you're heading out the door, like maybe they're not complete, or it's something that you have to pass on, but things that you're maybe if you look back, you'd be like, man, I wish we got that done. It could be for any reason. Like, I mean, it's not necessarily because the NPF didn't do something. It's
Yep.
government works slow. The police agencies work slow. Like it's just, things that you felt maybe could have moved faster, or if you had changed some stuff, maybe there would be a chance that it'd be completed by now. But anything that stands out in that regard for you?
Well, obviously there's continuously changing landscape, right? So, for example, Chief Norm Lipinski was terminated this week from the Surrey Police Service. We have had commitments from the RCMP, the province, and the feds that the transition would be over November 29th this year. Okay, well, now you've lost your leadership in the SPS. So now we have to advocate. And where I was just before I came on this call, I'm just going through a letter that we're sending off to the commissioner and the minister and all that great stuff to sit back and say, just because they've lost their leader doesn't mean any of this changes. Our expectation is still that the members remaining in Surrey are gone November 29th. Right. So we want your commitment that this doesn't change that. So similarly, like, we've had a lot of successes. This government's announced 1,000 new personnel. We're originally, the campaign promise was 1,000 new police officers. And then once elected, it changed to 1,000 personnel, which means, so we're trying to fight to make sure that, I think Canadians' expectations is when a government says we're going to put 1,000 new into the RCMP, they expect to see 1,000 police officers. So
Sworn members, regular members.
Yeah, sworn members, whether it's a regular member or a special constable or someone who's got a badge and sworn an oath versus an analyst in a back room. So there's that push to carry on with. And at the same time, that 1,000 new in the federal policing budget line shouldn't be coming from other areas. It should be 1,000 new, like net new, and moving that ball down the line. Obviously, pistol modernization has been done. Obviously, it took 11 years, but now the rollout of the Glock 45 is going to start happening. I wish that had happened faster. There's a whole bunch of little things in the procurement world that I would love to, carry forward with. We've just started the last 9 months or so, a full court press on the government for procurement and modernizing that. The Black Hawk helicopters and border security and the implementation of new drone technology is underway, right? I think that'll get across the finish line over the next year. We are the contract renewal with, provinces like Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and all of those areas is just starting again, right? Mainly because they had the resignation of the former prime minister. The cabinet had approved funding to start those negotiations. And then, of course, prorogation going into an election, it's all dead. Now they have to seek new funding to start those negotiations again. So it would have been nice to have been involved in that to push for what a modern RCMP contract policing service looks like that reflects 2026 and beyond, 2032 and beyond.
Oh, and all of this is stuff that I'll see Rob when he comes in, you hit the ground running. This is all your stuff you got to start on. Like these are all already ongoing. I mean, the procurement for the pistol's done, but I mean, there's other issues. So you're all kind of there for the next person to take on.
Should he choose to, right? And so these are all things that, I believed through, the strategic planning of the NPF, right? It's so, and so the general public or your listeners are aware, right? Like this is not a fiefdom, right? It's not Brian deciding that we need to do this. We have a board of directors. Our board of directors convened in 2020, 2021. They set up a strategic plan with deliverables. That strategic plan is passed on to me to accomplish. We go through budgeting annually with operational plans to accomplish the strategic plan. And then we went through that again last year. So there's a new strategic plan with deliverables and priorities over the next 3 years, which is passed over to me. And I look at different ways that we can accomplish these things and try to set up avenues to do that. So, but Rob, as he comes in, he might choose to do it a completely different way. That's completely up to him. And I don't want to, you sit back and say he should do this or he shouldn't do that. It's completely his job to decide what's a priority.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, it sounds like there's been a lot that you've had to take on in general. I mean, we look at the procurement, and I know that's going to be a discussion I'll have with obviously with the NPF in the future as well. Uh, Talk about the pistols, and that was over 10 years of a process. I'm just wondering, when you're looking back at the time, like, is there anything that could improve within government and the way they interact with whether it's businesses or agencies or associations, like whatever it might be? Is there a way to speed these things up? Is something missing? Because it seems like the most frustrating part of it all is the time it takes. And I can still respect that sometimes studies need to be done. Sometimes you have to consider, well, I get this, if we pick a pistol, well, now we got to do a bunch of training and we got to put a bill that's going to this other business. And like, we got to see if we're allowed to work with them. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background,
Yep.
but 10 years is like, holy shit. So,
Yeah.
are there ways to speed this up? Like what's it been like working with government?
Yeah, there are ways to speed it up, and so working with government obviously is challenging. And one of the challenge, and you see this particular government is actually big on efficiencies, right? So we've been tailoring everything that we've been putting forward to the minister responsible for procurement, as well as the prime minister and public safety about how they can make procurement for the RCMP specifically, but also public safety professionals across Canada more efficient. So let's not waste resources. Let's get the job done. So like the blue sky idea that we've been floating is why isn't there a national master standing offer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police that represents all sorts of police services across Canada. You got the RCMP, you got CBSA, you got corrections, you got paramedics, you got firefighters, right? Like all those folks are in the public safety field. Why don't we have a national master standing offer that leverages the ability for the government of Canada to buy big? And if you want to go in and buy a fire truck, you're the fire chief for Durham, and you log into your portal and you look at the approved fire trucks that are there on the national master standing offer that are available to you, and you pull out your Durham regional visa and you click, I need two.
So it's like a pool, right? Like a pool of
Exactly.
candidates already pre-approved. Here you go.
Yeah, and they do it already with Health Canada for the investigation of workplace violence and harassment complaints within federal government agencies. They've got an NMSO for external practitioners that can be hired by agencies to investigate workplace complaints. So it's just an extension of that. Like, for example, if you wanted a new pistol, okay, the National Master Standing Offer shows you've got 4 or 5 different approved vendors that offer these pistols for police service at this discounted rate, thanks to the Government of Canada's economies of scale. So you pull out your credit card, make the order, and off you go. And that's thanks to your membership in the CACP or whatever. And it came to us when, the Halifax region came to the NPF asking if we could advocate for them to buy body-worn cameras under the Government of Canada's contract.
Okay, I see.
Versus them going straight to Axon, which would be double the price, right? So I'm kind of like, well, that makes sense, right? Like, why wouldn't one broad agency be able to do that?
It goes back to your earlier point too about just now how all these police services are starting to work together and do things more collaboratively.
Yeah. And I mean, that would be a blue sky thing. And obviously you're going to be tearing down a bunch of silos. You're going to be operating extremely efficiently, which means chances are you don't need as many people in government, which is always a bad thing from their perspective. But the easier solution that can happen today is there are exceptions that the government can make when procurement impacts national security. So can the minister basically say, Commissioner, yes, I'm giving you this exception because the procurement of new drones for border security impacts national security. Therefore, you don't have to go through all the hoops and balances. And then thirdly, what we're asking for here, which is an easy implementation, is, the RCMP and public safety in Canada should have something similar as the defense industrial strategy. So, this government's announced here 2 bidders were done by Canada, off you go for the reinforcement of defense capacity and new equipment and new tools there. Well, why can't we do that for the RCMP and public safety in Canada, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, it's proven they can do it. So let's just expand the idea.
Well, I mean, the RCMP it falls into the national security spectrum of organizations. So you think
Yep.
that'd be an easy just to attach it into there. So as somebody who's worked a lot with government, within government, what has been the most frustrating part of that whole thing? Is it like the duration that it takes to get things done? Is it constantly having to explain over and over, like, this is what police actually do, and this is the truth of, again, the narrative piece. Um, I feel like there's so much that you might be able to touch on here, but what's kind of the most frustrating thing when dealing with the bureaucracy side of it?
Well, 2 things are frustrating. So on the one hand, there's the politics. So, for example, let's talk about we talked briefly about the Lawful Access Bill C-22, right? So a similar bill was tabled by the Harper Conservatives like 12 years ago.
Okay.
And partisan politics, the Liberals were against it, the NDP were against it. It died on the order table. It never got passed, right? This government now obviously wants to do a similar lawful access regime. And initially, partisan politics, the opposition was against it, even though they tabled something similar and they thought it was a priority 12 years ago. To the point where, and then before they rebranded Bill C2 into Bill C12, which was great. Now they got C22, which is just lawful access, and everybody was supportive of it at the outset. But now, of course, once it comes time to pass the House, politics plays a factor into it, and it's like, no, we think you should do this, we think you should do that. So there's that side of the coin, which I think is Canadians see through and they realize, oh, that's just politics. But it's frustrating, obviously, because it delays progress. The other side of the house is the difference. So within government, you have your bureaucracy, your bureaucrats. So in our case, that's Public Safety Canada. They're the full-time, lifelong employees in Public Safety Canada. And then you have your elected side, the ministerial staff, and that advance things. And they actually occupy different offices they're across from each other. You would think that they would all work together. But one of the challenges we face is sometimes the bureaucrats rule the day over the minister. So the minister might want to do this according to the prime minister or the PCO, the clerk of the Privy Council. But then the bureaucrats might be working behind the scenes with different folks within the RCMP or corrections or CSIS or whatever, which isn't in line with this. So then you have to undo that damage and kind of be the bridge to have a concerted front with numerous parties. Like, honestly, sometimes I think we're fighting a war with 7 different fronts, and you always have to think, where's the next flank coming from?
And that's because, like you're saying, they might be talking to someone else in the organization and getting different ideas, and then person A and B, they're just talking to different people. So it's like, well, now you kind of come in and be the bridge, maybe to explain, like, well, this is what both of them are actually talking about, but from different points of view or whatever it might be.
Definitely, and I mean, you see that actually shaping up in Alberta here.
Mm-hmm.
With the whole referendum piece, right? I can respect the premier's position about being in a very difficult spot. Like, I suspect she's choosing her words very carefully to keep her party united, but also not to piss off Albertans. That's a very difficult position to be in because, she's got a war brewing here on probably 7 different fronts. And she's trying to think, what word can I use today that's not going to be used against me in October? Right. So, and similarly with us, whether it's with a contracting partner or a minister in a contracting environment who may be getting information from an assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner in the RCMP, or from a bureaucrat in public safety, or from an analyst within their own department, or from a commanding officer's office in the RCMP of jurisdiction. Those are all different fronts. And then you've got the commissioner that might be saying something different, or the minister is something different, and you kind of got to be that total deconfliction area, and the trusted voice is the thing, right? Coming out with, no, this is the actual facts of the case.
My experience with this, and I'll equate it on a very small scale because we're not talking about Canada wide, but like even within our own organization, you see chief or deputy chiefs make a decision on something, and you might be someone, whether it's in a specialized unit or frontline, but you have like a very intimate knowledge of something or direct experience. And you go, why the hell are they buying that? Or why are they saying that? Like that could be wrong. It could be not understood properly. But it becomes a lot of the telephone game in between. And it's like, as soon as it goes from you to the next person in the rank, and for us, it's a little slightly smaller chain of command than the RCMP, but all it is, you go 1 or 2 people up, the message is completely distorted and they don't have the proper understanding. They're not saying the proper words. The message completely flips by the time it gets to the top. And if that's going to like the chief, now the chief's going to the government saying the completely wrong thing or whatever it might be, you're going, wow, now we're spending millions of dollars going in the wrong direction. So it's, I always find trying to find a person who can, one, interpret what needs to be said, interpret it properly, but also isn't afraid to. And kind of going back to your first point there, it sounds a little bit like you're saying something that I say on social media all the time is like politics trumps public safety. Politics trumps whatever else we're trying to get accomplished. And that's, I understand. I'm not naive. I understand that's the way the world works right now. But boy, wouldn't it be a crazy, blue sky example of someone can actually come out and just say the truth and be like, no, we need to do this because of these reasons. And we're going this direction. Done. Instead of the wordsmithing and the politicking and all that stuff. And then we're years down the road into a decision, nothing's done or it's done wrong and millions of dollars are gone. That's what I find the most frustrating when I think of governing bodies or chain of command, is just going the wrong direction. And it's like, why are we going the wrong direction? So that's probably the thing I would be most frustrated, or at least from outside looking in. That's what I see.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with I don't dismiss motivations or the busyness of people, right? So, I've had a lot of conversations with senior leaders within the RCMP, but also within different governments, where all they were briefed on was the executive summary.
Yeah.
And when you read the executive summary, it is not really reflective of what's contained in the actual report.
Mm-hmm.
So your decision making, because, hey, here's a busy leader, pick one. You don't want to waste their time. So you provide a 1-page executive summary, which might be tailored to go one way or the other, maybe not, but it's not reflective of the 300-page report and the recommendations contained within. And then when you talk to that leader who's made a decision based on that executive summary, they're like, holy shit, if I'd known that, or if I'd had time, which this is one of the advantages, I think, of Copilot and the emergence of artificial intelligence, right? Is like, if I get a 300-page report now, I can throw it into Copilot to summarize it for me versus relying on someone's interpretation and recommendation. So will we end up with leaders that make better decisions based on the facts presented before them, or just relying on, and I hate to say it, those putting forth executive summaries, hoping to look good. Everybody wants to look good to their boss.
Yeah.
So are you going to give them something that's bad news? Maybe.
But even on that, I think and I'll use our police service as an example, but I saw this in the RCMP too. But if someone doesn't like a decision that's made by the EPS in general, by the service, right away it's, well, why is the chief doing that? I don't like the chief or something. And I think we're kind of speaking to this right now. And, from my own experience, I would say the same thing, but I kind of take a pause and I go, well, is that necessarily the chief's fault? He's only as good as the guy below him that fed that information up the chain. What was that guy saying? Or what was that girl saying?
Yep.
Who passed the message to them? So it's like, is there a way around that where we can have more direct conversations and make sure we're getting the proper messaging up there? But it's very quick reaction, at least I see this, being at the ground level. The service has some new product or something that they're, another program for the constable has to learn how to use, and, or another piece of equipment I got to carry. Well, why is the chief doing that? He's the bad guy. It's like, I don't know. What was he told? Who passed that message that we need that? There's people in between. Maybe they're the problem. So it's like finding that person. I guess in the government's case, it might be the chief of staff. Not to call out chiefs of staff, but I'm just saying, they control the flow. They control what gets to the top. So what messages are they passing on? So
Yeah, and I don't like to talk about bias as much, even though we all have them, right? Even if you look at your staff, right, working that way, like every analyst, every reviewer, whatever, they all have their preconceived notions about how they write things. And one of the challenges we see within the RCMP is that continuously ministerial transition binders talk about the breakup of the RCMP and becoming the FBI of the North. And I'm like, really? Like that's 20-year-old stuff. And if you're going to have that, so clearly it's internal staff, maybe who have a preconceived notion about what the RCMP should look like. And they allow that to continually push into a ministerial transition binder. So it ends up constantly being a topic and a fight that we have to fight, in those political circles. And that's unfortunate, right? So,
yeah. Well, maybe on that, I'll ask too. Do you have any kind of foresight on what's coming next for the RCMP? Anything that's in the works? I don't know if you can announce it here, but is it any change in direction, or is it still focused on the frontline policing, having the fenced funding for the federal positions, like the national security side of it? Kind of talked about that before. Are we still kind of trending in that direction, or is there any changes coming?
I don't think you're going to see any changes coming for service delivery. Like a Canadian will call 911, and and whether the RCMP shows up or a municipal or provincial police service shows up, right? That's going to carry on. I think what you are seeing now within the RCMP, which is a little bit of angst amongst our membership, because this will be the third reorganization of federal policing, I think, in probably the last 10 years, is the RCMP is trying to get better at accounting. You'd think it would be easier, but when you get into the Mounties, like I use a term of Mountie math, right? So, for example, you're running a homicide file in Sundre, Alberta. So KDIV Major Crime is down there. They're doing a homicide file. They've got an identified target. They need a plane for surveillance. The provincial police service in K Division doesn't have an RCMP plane, let's just say, that can do surveillance. The only plane available is the federal plane for national security operations. So the team commander asks to use that plane. That plane is authorized for use because it's down this week. There's no federal investigations ongoing. Well, who pays for that plane? Does the cost of the pilot, the fuel, the maintenance, all that stuff get billed back to KDIV Major Crime? Our practice over the last 40 years has been no. It's just there. Use it. And nobody really cares about the bill because it's all pursuit of the common good, right? So But as governments, municipal, provincial, and federal, start to look at each line on their public safety item, they're saying, well, that's not the case. Witness Protection Program, an example, is run by the RCMP, funded exclusively by the federal government. Who's the biggest users of that? Usually it's municipal and provincial police services. Does the federal government bill back to those municipal and provincial police services for the cost of using the Witness Protection Program? No, they don't. So I think those are the things in the backroom accounting fields that they're trying to sort out, because when you've got a $7+ billion organization like the RCMP, and 1/3 of that is dedicated to contract policing, as they go into renewal of contracts, they want to have some clear lines to say, this is what you get when you sign on this contract, and this is how you're going to be billed for it. It's no different what they've done in Nova Scotia by implementing their police standards last year. So, for example, the town of Amherst, Nova Scotia, smaller police service, 29 members, something like that. But they don't have a homicide unit. They don't have a robbery unit. So when they had a murder, they would call HDIV to come in, their entire CIC, their MCU team, whatever. They would investigate the murder. But the town of Amherst never paid for it.
Oh, really? Okay.
They never got a bill for it. So what you had was the community of Digby and all those other contracting environments who were paying for the provincial police service to full pull were actually subsidizing the police service of the community of Amherst. So now that they have these standards in place, which I think is what's going to evolve across the country, the town of Amherst has to attest to the province that either A, yes, we have our own major crime unit and we don't need H division anymore, or B, we have an MOU with the RCMP in Nova Scotia and there's a cost recovery mechanism in place. So the province is not funding our public safety. So I think that's what you're going to see over the next 3 to 4 years, from a federal side to a specialized police services, DNA data bank, CPIC, all of
That
those.
could change greatly the funding.
Yeah.
I mean, that once they start looking into these numbers, I find it funny what they do and don't track. Like from my own experience, like I asked for hey, can I go to this conference? It'll cost you $100 and maybe per diem. And they're like, no. But then send the jet. You're like, what the hell? That's costing $1 million. And when we throw this thing in the air, but it's just like, the things they do and do not account for. It's actually very surprising when you really break it down.
Yeah. So I think that's what you're going to see. I mean, obviously there's been a resurgence, and probably with Edmonton, I'm pretty sure, and in Calgary, like there has been a resurgence over the last 4 years of interest in the public safety profession, right? Like honestly, we have too many applicants. We can't process them fast enough. That's the problem now, the logjam. You saw the Auditor General's report came out in the RCMP is that, okay, there are a lot of people interested in joining the RCMP, but you guys can't get them through the application process in nearly a timely fashion to get them to depot. So we're missing out on that, right? But so there's a resurgence of interest, I think is great. Over my time with the NPF, I think we are now 750 to 800 net positive members within the RCMP. So we've grown, 150 to 200, 150 or so a year, which is good. That needs to double over the next 3 to 4 years to take on all the vacancies and all the new initiatives, right? But hopefully that's on the right path. One of the challenges I see is because, so my term is going to be ending. I'm sure Commissioner DeHame is probably considering his options, right? He's 39 years of service, 4 years in the role now. It's usually a 5-year term. So are you going to see a new president of the NPF and a new commissioner of the RCMP maybe in the next year? And what does that do for stability for the membership? And commissioners can take completely different paths. They might come in with a different mandate or a different idea of how things go. So hopefully things remain focused on operations.
Yeah, no, I mean, as long as public safety kind of takes precedent over all the other stuff in the backgrounds, I think that's number one, first and foremost, which should be at top of mind for everybody. Just as we're kind of coming to the end of the time here, I know we kind of mentioned at the beginning, but what is next for you, or what are you hopeful maybe for in the future? maybe some public commentating. Maybe you're going to be on CTV, be a public speaker, podcast. You can have a podcast too.
No, there's a lot of stuff that's out there, uh, just with my particular role, and it's unfortunate, but I have some name recognition on Google. Like, honestly, I'm all over the Google.
Mhm.
But we'll see. I've had different places reach in, different people reach in. We're looking at different things, but my obviously my love for the membership and for the RCMP, and I think I have more time and more energy to give to that. So can I do that internally? Is it in operations? My discussion with the commissioner was pretty blunt. Um, like, I live on the St. Lawrence Seaway, and there's something called the Cornwall Regional Task Force, right, which deals
Yep.
with firearm smuggling, human smuggling, drug smuggling, illegal, anything that goes across the New York-Ontario border and the 401 and towards the Mohawk-Akwesasne reserves down on the south shore of Montreal, right?
It is the hotbed right now.
Like, I would love to do that, right? So I told
Yeah.
him, I said, hey, if you want to plug me into operations, I'm happy to go over there and, drive fast boats and skidoos and stuff like that every day and have an impact. But we'll see. So I'm not worried about where job lands and what it looks like. So
Very cool. I wish you all the best, and obviously I'll keep in touch. And this isn't the last we've seen of you. You'll be back on here. We'll get you back on the show and get an update wherever you are. But yeah, thank you very much. And I want to say, uh, I'm very thankful for the NPF, even being coming from another police service, all the work that you guys have done, but also the support you've shown this show has been top notch, and I've enjoyed thoroughly working with the entire team over there. Karen, Sarah, yourself, there's a whole bunch of others. Just I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to working with the new team as people transition in.
yeah,
But definitely, be in touch with you, and keeping an eye on where you go in the future. So I think you have a lot to share, obviously, with all the work you've done. And I hope you're in a position where you can still share a lot of that wisdom on a very big platform or with a wide audience. So
yeah. If I could narrow it down to one topic, then maybe I could do a TED talk. But it's really hard for me to focus just down to one topic because there's just so many. So
those are hard, and public speaking is, yeah, that's a whole nother beast. So, but
sure.
thank you for being on here today. Really appreciate it.
No, and I think the first time we talked, I said to you, I said, you picked the right name for your show, right? The Quiet Professional, because I think that's what cops do, right? They just show up, get the job done. They don't expect accolades. So and I appreciate you and what you're doing, and we hope to have hopefully the relationship carries on into the future because it's no longer my decision. So
Yeah, I got to talk to the new people. So,
yeah,
all right. Well, hang on
yeah,
the line for 2 seconds. We'll say bye offline.
sounds good.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.